Hello, everyone. Glad that you all could be here with me today. We're going to be in session 8, page 73, and we're going to go through Isaiah 40, verses 18 through 31. And the lesson today is about God renews. God provides strength for those who trust in Him, and we all know that. We've been taught that, we've experienced that, so we all are well aware of that. You know, we as people kind of like being compared to someone who's well respected in the community. You know, be it a pastor, a doctor, or something. Sometimes we just want to be compared to them in the same sense that, you know, this guy's well respected. People like him. He's a good man. So we sometimes feel like we should feel like we're them too. We don't always are like them, but we should feel like them. But however, no one likes being compared to someone or something beneath him or her. So we always want to compare ourselves to somebody who we think is better or bigger than us. Isaiah understood this and proclaimed that because everything is beneath God, nothing can compare to him. And God alone is worthy of our trust and our worship. So we're going to go into that. So let's go on in and see what we can discover out of this lesson. And I'm going to give you a little brief history of back through Isaiah here just for a few minutes. You know, as the people of Judea faced the future hardships of Babylonian exile, this 8th century prophet extorted them to remember who God is. He is the God who chose them and would be with them. This is God's chosen people. He chose them. He didn't just take, go A, B, C, I'll take number C or D in this lot. He chose the Israelites to be his people. And he's there to save us from any threats. And then he rewards us for being faithful to him. So, we don't have any enemies that we face that God can't take care of. If we're faithful to him, God will be more than happy to take care of us. As the Creator, God has both the ability and authority to do what he wants with his creation. Now, we can look at that in several different ways, but he does have that right. So he has supremacy over the nations of the world just by his knowledge and wisdom. God is superior to the nations because he is superior to their idols and their false gods. God is above all of that. God created the stars and he calls them by name. And I didn't realize that until I read this section that he named the stars. And I think that's an amazing thing for the number of stars out there that he knows each and every one and knows it by name. So that is our Creator. Our God does that. We know that the other gods that people worship, they can't do anything. They just have to sit on a shelf or on a platform or podium. But that's all they're doing. They're just sitting there. They're false idols. They're false gods. Now the Lord establishes his supremacy over the nations by pointing out that they are only temporal, while he is eternal. So we're going to see this in the next text here, just how God handles this situation. So let's go on in, and we're going to start with verse 18, and we're going to read verses 18 and 19, and then we'll stop and talk about them a little bit. Let's go with verse 18. With whom will you compare God? What likeness will you set up for comparison with him? So let's just stop right there. So Isaiah challenged the people as he raised this question. With whom will you compare God? The Lord created all things. So who or what could compare to him? And the answer is going to be, there's no other God but the God of Israel. So nobody's false idols, their false gods, can compare to the God of Israel. Nobody. So he will come on earth, and it's only temporal. But God and his words are eternal. False idols, they're just here temporarily. But God and his word are eternal. He will come with strength, establish his rule, and reward those who have been faithful to him. See, God is awesome in power as creator. God is also inherently holy in his knowledge and wisdom. God has always been and always will be complete in his knowledge and understanding apart from external sources. The nations are nothing before him. That's how powerful of a God we have. Nations, they can't stand up to him. They are nothing to him. So we see we have a mighty God, a powerful God. So let's go to verses 19 through 20. Now you see Isaiah's asking questions to the Israelites right now. So 19 is another question. It says, an idol, something that a smelter cast and a metal worker plates with gold and makes silver chains for? Now, the idols of nations are no comparison to God, since an idol is nothing more than a human creation without power. It can't even stand on its own sometimes. It has to be held up by something. And then Isaiah goes on to describe the manufacturing of a metal idol that begins with a smelter, pouring a molten metal into a mold to form the idol. And this is man-made. And then next, the metal worker beat paper-thin pieces of gold and cover the image with it. And then after that, they put silver chains on it. Now, is these silver chains for decoration, or are they something that's going to fasten the idol down to something? Idols cannot stand on their own. They are just that. They're man-made. They're nothing. They can't do anything. They can't hardly even stand on their own. So we have a God who is a real God. Now, verse 20, it says, a poor person who could not afford to have a metal idol made had to get a wood carver to carve one. But then first you'd have to get him to carve a podium to set it on. And the podium couldn't rot, so they had to get a piece of wood that wasn't going to rot to set this idol on. And all this was man-made. It wasn't anything but man-made. It came into existence by humans, not by any God. You know, Isaiah highlighted the absurdity of going to so much trouble to worship what is ultimately worthless and nothing. How can human hands compare to God? They're just wood, clay, or metal. The people who worship them construct them with the materials created by a living God, our God. Humanity must always recognize the infinite distance between God and his creation. He loses the distinction between the Creator and his creation is to fall into the sin of idolatry. To think God as just another God or compare him with other idols is blasphemy. It is dishonoring to God's name, character, work, and attributes, and Isaiah sought to show his audience that the false gods were based on delusion. There's no other God but God. That's what Isaiah is trying to tell these Israelites. There's no other God. These man-made gods are not gods. God, our Creator, made the things that they're making into idols. So they're just made by humans. And somehow along the way, the Israelites seem to have gotten this because they'd go to idol worship. And of course, it always got them into trouble. So this is where Isaiah is talking to them, saying, look, what have you gained so far? You haven't gained nothing but false idols. They're not going to save you. They're not going to be there for you when you need them. So let's go on into verses 21 right now, or 21, 21. Now in verse 21, Isaiah is going to ask 4 questions. And these are questions that will ask the Israelites, what were you thinking, more or less? So they're going to compare. So we're going to read all 4 of them, then I'm going to tell you which ones will match up. And you probably already know after I read them. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been declared to you from the beginning? Have you not considered the foundation of the earth? And verses 1 and 4 go together, okay? And if you read them together, they kind of sound like they fit. Do you not know? Have you not considered the foundation of the earth? But the main 2 questions, I think, is 2 and 3. Have you not heard? Has it not been declared to you from the beginning that God is the only God? Have you not heard that before? That's what Isaiah is trying to get through to him. So let's go into verse 22 now, and it says, God is enthroned above the circle of the earth. Its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a thin cloth and spreads them out like a tent to live in. When God looks down on us, we look like little bitty grasshoppers. We may be about 2 inches long, just about the size of a normal grasshopper. So that's what he sees when he looks down on us. We're not big. We're nothing but just humans in God's eyes. God loves us, and he wants us to do good, but we're no bigger than a grasshopper when he looks down. Isaiah just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that the Lord is the creator and nothing compares to him. And that should be a matter of general knowledge. Now when it says he stretches the heavens out like a thin cloth and spreads them out like a tent. Now that's a pretty heavy thing. God is not only greater than the gods of the nations, he is also over all the nations. God sits on his throne above the earth. The circle of the earth may refer to the horizons of the earth or by the sky. God is the creator. But also the Lord's prophets repeatedly told them God is the creator. But you see, the audience that Isaiah is preaching to, they never listen. They just never listen. They don't, and it's kind of like if we look at ourselves today, lots of us don't listen today. So it's not just the Israelites that we're talking to here, it's also ourselves. Well, let's look at verse 22 or 23 and go on through the rest of them. He reduces princes to nothing and makes judges of the earth like a wasteland. They are barely planted, barely sown. Their stems hardly take roots in the ground when he blows on them, and they wither, and when a whirlwind carries them away like stubble. To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal? Asked the Holy One. Look up and see who created these. He brings out the stars by numbers. He calls all of them by name. Because of his great power and strength, not one of them is missing. Boy, that's a tremendous couple of verses right there. God is all greater than all the nations. He is over all the nations. He spreads out his tent to uncover the circle of the world. See, the vastness of God's reign is magnified by the minuteness of humanity and every creature inhabiting the earth. God is so great. He requires the whole expanse of the heavens to serve as his tent. His glory fills up the whole heaven. We got an awesome God. We got an awesome God. Officials who sit in high seats of leadership among the nations may appear to have great power, but they are under the rule of the Almighty God. Isaiah described the perilousness and temporariness of world leaders using the metaphor of young plants. In other words, they do not establish themselves by their own power. It is by God's power that they're in the position that they're in. We need to fully understand that even our leaders today are there because that's where God planted them. Therefore, as impressive as now I may not say this word right. I get a lot tongue-tied on some of the names in the Bible, but Sennacherib appeared when the Assyrians invaded Judea and surrounded Jerusalem. And as opposing as King Nebuchadnezzar would have